Assalamu alaikum all. Hopefully all of you are safe. So this is a segment, and in that particular last chapters, we will actually discuss about the terms labor relations and collective bargaining. So for discussing these issues, I'm just trying to share the slide so that you can have a clear idea about the areas that we are going to explore today. So that is about the terms labor relations and collective bargaining. So in the last class, what we have discussed. In the very last class, we have discussed about ethics, justice, and fair judgments from the part of the employers or the particular bodies they are related to the recruitment and selection process. So in that particular sessions, we are going to explain if the organization fails to maintain ethics, fair justice for the employees of the organizations, then what might happen and how it can be solved by using different mechanisms. So that's the chapter that will discuss about the labor relations and the collective bargaining. So I'm not just trying to elaborate my speech right at this moment. I'm just trying to explore onto the very specific part of our today's discussion. So before that, I'm just trying to elaborate this thing so that you can have a check in which particular area we are going to explore in today's sessions. So the name of this chapter is labor relations and collective bargaining. So this is just the history that suggests us about the inaugurations of this particular terms of labor movement. So in the very late of 18th century, 1790s, so the skilled craftsmen organized themselves into a trade unions in the United States of America. So on that particular moment, what has happened? It is for the first time the labor came into a processions for enjoying or for ensuring their own rights. So that was just the beginning of the journey of labor movement. And then in 1869, the Knights of the Labor seek social and political reform. That means there was a group that has been formed by the employees, general employees, and the leader of that particular group has come out and tried to ensure their social and political reform. And they have made their voice loud for that particular issues. And after that, in 1886, American Federations of Labor pursues bread and butter issues and improve their working conditions. So in 1886, the government realized and the government imposed or they have executed a particular American Federation for maintaining all the rights and all the benefits for the particular organizational employees. So that was about in 1886, and in 1927, the Dhakeshwari Cotton Mills Workers was founded in Bangladesh. So the journey of labor movement has been arisen in Bangladesh in 1927. So in 1927, it has formed in our country, and with that ultimate proceedings, we are getting the sense right at this moment. So in 1937, what had happened? The cotton workers strikes as a whole and gave birth to the labor movement in Bangladesh. So organizedly and collectively, in 1937, they have come out and they have formed a particular group among themselves. Okay, so that was the history of the world, and especially to the Bangladesh perspective, that from when the particular movement come across in our country and overall globe. So that's about the labor movement. And now we are going to the next slide, which will actually suggest us about what are the reasons for which the employees of the organizations try to collect themselves, try to combine themselves. So that is the very important pulse that we need to understand. So the first thing for which the organizational employees try to bring themselves together, that is for enjoying solidarity. Now the question is, what is solidarity? Solidarity means, as we know, that is unity. And unity is the very common pillars for getting success from the organizational employees and the employer sides. So whenever the organizational employees feel that particular concern that we are not united, and we need to have very united for getting the proper rights and justifications from the top level managements, at that particular time they try to form a labor union or the labor management union. So that is the basic pulse for which the organization employees try to merge themselves together. And it is the kind of formula that ensures the fair share for the employees. Okay, so the organizational employers try to consider their rights and benefits, and based on that perceptions or conceptions, then they try to execute their appropriate policy for the employees. So that is the basic reasons for organizing the workers in a particular union, to ensure solidarity, that will ensure to get the fair share, and that will help to ensure the protections of the managements and the employees as well. So that is the basic pulse for which the union forms. And there are some other reasons for which the employees try to combine themselves. So these are like low morale, fear of job loss, arbitrary management actions. So these are some other reasons for which the organizational employees try to merge themselves together. So sometimes the organizational employees suffer low morale, or they feel very frustrated due to the different sort of environmental and the logical issues. And on that particular moment, they feel the importance of having a union. Whenever the union observes that sort of issues for the general employees, they try to counsel the general employees. They try to give some sort of suggestions to them so that they can come out from that sort of problems. And the next issues that happens, that is the fear of job loss. Sometimes the organizational employees have the concern of losing their job. Why that happens? It happens for different sort of situational factors. Say for example, due to the COVID-19 situations, the employees of Bangladesh and all over the world are suffering from that sort of fear, and they are suffering from that sort of fear, and many of the employees have lost their jobs already from the job markets, and now they are searching another jobs for getting entry into that particular area. But what has been happening right at this moment? So there has been a lockdown all over the world, and employees do not have any sort of space to find out for their own reasons. So this is another reasons for which the organizational employees try to establish a particular union so that they can make their voice loud in favor of the employees. So these are the issues for which the organizational employees try to form the union or the labor union. And the final thing that we are experiencing from this particular slide, that is the arbitrary management's actions. Yes, it happens to the organizations that sometimes the top level managements or the stockholders try to impose some very discriminatory policies for the employees, and sometimes they try to make some strict policies for the general employees, which is not perfect according to the eye of law. So if that happens, who will actually make their voice loud in favor of the employees? Yes, it is obviously the union or the labor union who will come across and try to make a negotiations between these other issues. So these are the reasons for which the organizational employees try to form a union so that they can have their proper justice, they can have their proper fair share, they can have their proper sort of moral duties from the organizations that should be abided by. So these are the reasons for which the organizational employees try to combine themselves. And now we are just trying to have a picture of this particular slide that suggests us about the kind of reasons if we want to give a pictorial presentations of these particular reasons. So that will be as like this particular slide. So the union bargaining aims, that is, firstly, increased workplace security for the union, and apart from that, what they try to do, they try to improve the wages, hours, working conditions, job security, and the benefits. So these are the issues that the union try to ensure for the general employees. So these are the benefits that we can get whenever we will experience the unions within the organizations who will actually make their voice loud in favor of the employees. But yes, there are some pitfalls or there are some loopholes that we can experience in case of forming that sort of labor practices. So now the question is, what sort of problems that might be created, or what sort of attributes that they can present from the employer's side? So whenever they experience that the organizational employees are trying to combine themselves, they are making their voice loud in favor of their interests and rights, at that particular times, the employers and their unions try to make some sort of issues, or they are trying to create some sort of issues which will actually hampers the normal growth of the unions. So what they try to do, this has been discussed in that particular slide. So the first thing that they try to do is to interfere with the restraining or coercions of the employees. That means the employers sometimes try to coerce, or sometimes they try to restrain employees to join in the labor union. Why? Because they fear, or they get the sort of concern that if the majority of the employees join in a particular union, then they will be very strong, and they will try to apply their sort of power within the organizations. And for that particular reason, they try to coerce, they try to restrain the general employees for joining in that particular union. So this is sort of unfair judgments that has been done by the employers within the organizations to some extent. So that is the first thing. And then what they try to do, they try to dominate or interfere with either the formations or the administrations of the labor unions. That means sometimes they try to dominate the interest of the organizational employees, and they try to interfere with the union concerns or their decisions. So that is another perspective that we can call that this is very unfair from the employer side. Apart from that, they try to discriminate against the employees for legal union activities. So forming union for the general interest of the employees is a very legal issues that has been practiced all over the world. But sometimes some organizations try to discriminate against these particular issues, and that has been happened to some extent from the employer sides. So these are the issues that has been created or that tried to be created by the employers within the organizations for having the sense that the unions or the employees should not be very united to make their voice loud. So these are the problems that can be created by the particular employers within the organizations. And apart from that, the problems can be created by the unions as well. So what kinds of problems that they can create for the organizations and the employees? The first that they can create for the general employees or the unions, that is to restrain or coerce employees from exercising their guaranteed bargaining rights. So that is the thing, that the employees have created the unions for ensuring their rights, for confirming their equal rights. But sometimes it has been experienced that the union try to talk with the top level managements, and they become very what I should say, they become very interested to maximize their own wealth. And what actually happens in the 11th hour, that the employees loses their rights. So the general employees loses their rights. So this is the kind of problem that can be created by the union itself. So the employees should be very careful about it, that there should be the members who will join to the union. They will actually make their voice loud for the general people or for the general employees' interest. So this is very important from the employees' concerns. Apart from that, what the union can create or they can impose, that they can create the employers to discriminate against the employees in order to encourage or discourage their memberships in a union. So sometimes in favor of the top level managements or their consultations, the union tries to discriminate against the employees in order to encourage to join in the particular union. So it has happened uh, to some countries, especially the developing countries, that the unions are not working according to the interest or according to the purpose for which they have been created. So these are the reasons for which the union sometimes create some sort of unfair practices within the organization. And sometimes they refuse to bargain in good faith with the employers about their wages, about the general employees' working hours, their other sort of employment conditions. So the union has been formed for confirming these other issues, but sometimes they try to take the path of the top level managements in the favor of top level management. They try to create a sort of environment where the general employees fail to ensure their proper rights and justice. So that's where's the problem that can be created by the union, labor union. So the general employees must be careful about all these issues. And the final thing that we can experience from this slide, that is to engage in feather bedding. That means requiring an employer to pay an employee for services not performed. That means the organization sometimes try to provide the amount or the salary or the some other benefits and service for the services that they have provided, but not for the productivity. So it is a sort of judgment that is not fair from the employee's perspective. So the union might lose their interest and try to combine themselves with the top level management and try to impose these other issues for the general employees, which is not fair. So that can be happen from the union sides, which we call that is very unfair for the unions. So that might happen into the organizations. Now we are going to explain about the very important issues for the final exam, that is the union drive and the elections. That means whenever we are deciding that we are going to open or we are going to have a particular elections for creating the union, what we should do or what we can do for that particular reasons. The first thing that we need to confirm, that is the initial contract. So that is the first thing for choosing elections or for happening elections within the organizational premises for creating the labor union. So the first thing, that the union determines the employees' interest in organizing and sets up the organizing committee. That means in that particular reasons or in that particular perspective, the union try to form a particular organizing committee who will actually monitor the rights and benefits for the general employees. And they can appoint a labor relations consultants, and they can also bring union salties. That means the union groups. So this is the kind of contract that has been signed by both the top level management and the union managements or the labor union managements. So they try to combine themselves together and they try to fix up themselves in a particular point where they decides about all these issues. Step number 2 that suggests us about the obtaining authorization cards. Yes, for having the clarifications of this particular organizing committee or for having the authentications of this particular organizing committee, what we need to ensure? We need to ensure the actual number of people that should be signed in the organization authorization cards. So this will ensure the validity of confirming a particular organizing committee within the organization. So 30% of eligible employees in an appropriate bargaining unit must sign the cards. So the decision that has been taken, it needs to be compiled or it needs to be complied by at least 30% employees within the organization. So This is another very important issues that we have presented in step number 2. And along with that particular issues of obtaining authorization card, there are some other issues that we need to keep in our minds, that the employers sometimes responses to the organizing of these trade unions. They can attack the unions on ethical or moral grounds and cite the cost of union memberships. That means the top level management sometimes try to focus about these particular issues of cost of union memberships. And what have actually happens within the organizations, that they try to suggest that this is a very costly manner, this is a very expensive sort of formula for the organizations which has been created right at this moment, so we should not create any sort of labor union. So sometimes they try to attack, and sometimes they try to force or the coerce the general employees to form that sort of union. They cannot make promises or benefits. Sometimes the employers do not show their interest for creating these sort of promises which should be applied into the future time. So these are the sort of responses that the employers can create in case of forming that particular union. So what we have discussed in our previous slides, so why we are discussing these particular slides right at this moment, because we are telling about the general steps that need to be followed in case of creating elections within the organizations about the labor union management. So whenever the labor union managements try to arrange a particular elections for creating a committee, at that particular time, the employers try to force these other issues. The employers sometimes they try to create that sort of issues, which can work as a bottleneck, or which can work as a problem for implementing that sort of issues. So that's why we have discussed these particular issues in these forms of slides. So whenever the employers create that sort of problems for the general employees for creating a union, the union activities can be like that. So they can sometimes picket the firms subject to the 3 constraints. That means they try to come up processions against all those misdeeds that has been created by the organizational management authority. So in that particular reasons, they try to do some sort of activities which has been presented in that particular slide, that it must file a petitions for an elections within 30 days after the start of picketing. So whenever they have come in a particular processions in favor of arranging a particular elections, at that particular time, they can give the top level managements 30 days of particular period of time so that they can arrange these particular elections for the general employees. And the second issues that we are experiencing from this slide, that is the firm cannot already be lawfully reorganizing another union. So if a particular union has end up its journey in a particular time period, then it is the responsibility of both the parties, top level management and the general employees, that they will try to bring a consensus among themselves and try to create a particular union for keeping the interest of the general employees. But sometimes they fail to do that sort of activities, and for that reasons, the firms, when they fail at that particular times, the employees and their unions try to organize themselves and try to protest in that particular reasons. And the final thing that we are experiencing, that there cannot have been a valid elections during the past 12 months. Okay, so if there is no existence of the unions within the organizations, and if that happens for at least 12 months or 1 year, then the employees they can come as a whole and try to protest about these particular issues and try to ensure their unions within the organizations who will actually make their voice loud in favor of them. So these are the incidents that can be created by the general employees within the organizations and their unions. And the final stage that we have discussed, that is hold a hearing. So hold a hearing means that after forming the particular union, there should have a consensus, or there should have a consent from the from the employer side. So they need to bring a consent about the particular union that has been formed by the general employees within the organizations. And this is about step number 3. So these are the steps that should be kept in their minds while forming a particular unions within the organizations. Okay, so now we are going to discuss about the particular role that the union should follow, the particular activity that they should actually perform. That is collective bargaining. Okay, now the question is, what is collective bargaining? Collective bargaining is a particular process by which the employees and the top level managers try to have a particular try to bring themselves in a particular point so that both the parties can enjoy the win-win situation. So that is the basic pulse of collective bargaining. So collective bargaining is a sort of issues where we experience that the managements and the labor are required by the law to negotiate their wages, working hours, and the terms and conditions of employment in a good faith. So in that particular segment, or in that particular issues, what we experience that both the parties try to negotiate themselves in a particular point where both of them can enjoy the win-win situation. So for that particular collective bargaining, what is the good faith bargaining that we are going to present in that particular slide? Both the parties try to communicate and negotiate. Okay, so they try to bring themselves together and they try to communicate and negotiate themselves about these particular issues. And then they match proposals with the counter proposals in a reasonable efforts. So they try to create, or they try to give some sort of proposals, and in return they take some sort of proposals. And there will be the party who will actually make a negotiations between these all, or among those all sort of bargaining points. And the final thing, neither party can compel the other to agree proposals to make any specific concessions. So the actual benefits of collective bargaining is that no party can force for adopting their particular proposals by the other parties. So that is the actual pulse for which the collective bargaining actually operates within the organizations. So it will actually work as a midpoint where both the parties will enjoy their own rights. So in this particular slide, what we are experiencing that the violations of good faith in bargaining. So why the bargaining fails, or why sometimes we experience that the bargaining is not operating according to the purpose of the organization. It has happened for some reasons, and there are some reasons that has been presented in that particular slide, which is very important for our exam. That is the reason, the first thing that we are experiencing from this slide, that is the surface bargaining. That means sometimes the organizational employees and the top level managements, both from their sides, try to make a surface level of bargaining. That means they don't try to get the entry into the deeper parts of these particular problems and try to bring the solutions. So whenever they fail to ensure these common ethics within the organizations, or these common particular sort of interests within the organizations, at that particular times that bargaining fails. Okay, so we need to go in the deeper parts of the problems, and we need to bring a solutions from the from all the stakeholders of the organizations. So this is very important thing that we need to keep our minds while we are going to make a bargaining with the top level managements. Okay, number 2, that is the inadequate concessions. That means sometimes the top level managements try to reduce the service and benefits for the general employees, and they don't try to consider the concessions for the general employees. They don't try to think sometimes the general employees as a human being. So if that happens from the employer side or the top level management side, so that is called inadequate concession. So the employers and their authorities should consider every human beings as a very respectable one, and they need to ensure the proper concessions for enjoying their own own life. So that is very important. Sometimes we try to fail, we try to uh, enjoy that sort of particular issues, and that gives the failure of a good faith bargaining. Apart from that, in the step number 3 or point number 3 that we are experiencing, that is the inadequate proposals and demands. That is very common in our country, that both the parties try to fix up their proposals in a very high note. So if they try to fix up their own interests in a very high note, so what will happen? uh, both the parties will actually lose their concern to get enjoy these sort of benefits. So that is another particular point, that sometimes they create some sort of excessive and very demanding proposals, both from their sides, and that can hamper the actual growth of our bargaining power. And sometimes there happens the dilatory tactics. Sometimes the top level management agrees with the unions, but they don't try to execute it at very fast speed. So whenever they try to delay and follow the dilatory tactics, at that particular time, what will happen? The unions will lose their trust over the top level management, and they will not join in the next meeting in favor of the general employees. So that can create some sort of problems which might happen in the bargaining process. And number 5, that is imposing the conditions. So if you impose conditions, then the actual activity will hamper. So we must try to keep these things in our minds, that we are bargaining, but the bargaining should be very condition free. Okay, both the parties will win, but there should have not been any condition that cannot be abided by some other parties. So these are the problems that can be created by both the top level managements and the general employees unions, and that can actually hamper our actual good faith bargaining. So that is about this particular slide. So the preparations for the negotiations. So as we have discussed about some problems of the bargaining areas, so this particular slide is suggesting us about the preparations for negotiations. That means the sources of negotiations informations. So the local and industry pay and benefits comparisons. So we can collect that sort of negotiations idea from these particular sites if we can try to explore. Then the distributions of the demographics of the workforce, benefits cost, overall earnings levels, and the amount of cost of overtime. That means these are the sources of getting the negotiations information. So whenever we are having a discussions with the top level managements regarding the interest, regarding the negotiations issues with the top level managements, we need to collect some sort of informations from these other sites so that we can bring our actual solutions in favor of our general employees. Okay, so this particular slide in a pictorial presentations is suggesting us about the bargaining item categories. So there are some sort of mandatory items, voluntary items, and illegal items. So these are the sort of items for which the general employees try to bring themselves together and create some sort of bargaining discussions. So sometimes they ask for the very mandatory items like the salary, like their basic working conditions, their working hours within the organization. So these are the very mandatory items that for which they try to bring themselves together. But there are some sort of voluntary items. So for example, that can be the bonuses, the festival allowances, the transportations allowances, the medical sort of benefits. So these are the voluntary items, but for which the organization and employees can take the help of unions, and who will actually try to arrange a particular bargaining. And the final thing that we are experiencing from this block diagram, that is the illegal items. Sometimes the organizational employees and the unions try to come up with some very illegal items or very illegal demands. That is, they are trying to have a vacations for 1 month or 2 months, or sometimes they try to create some sort of conditions for the general employees, so which can create problems for having a good faith in the bargaining process. So These are the sort of items for which the organizational employees try to come up with the unions and make bargaining with the top level management. So these are the issues. So whenever we are going to deal with a particular bargaining stage, we need to follow that sort of processes, or we need to follow that sort of stages in a particular process of bargaining. So this is the slide which is suggesting us about the bargaining process. So the first activity that we need to do is to present the initial demands. So from the top level management and from the general employees, both the parties will try to present their initial demands. So the employees can make their voice loud for working at best 6 hours or 8 hours within the organizations. That can be the proposal from the employee side. And on the other hand, that should be the proposal from the employer side, that they can fix a particular salary and then they can negotiate about that particular issues. So both the parties in the first stage will try to present their initial demands. In the second stage, they try to reduce of their demands. That means if both the parties find a very negotiating area, then they try to reduce their demands that they have presented in the stage number 1. So they try to bring themselves in a very understandable manner, and they try to bring themselves in a very unique platform, which will actually ensure the win-win situation for both the parties. So that is the reductions of the demands from both the sides. Then they create a subcommittee, and the subcommittee will ensure the informal settlement, and the informal settlement will include each group goes back to their sponsors. That means they agree with that particular issues and they try to come up with their sponsor who will actually implement these sort of issues. And finally, they try to sign the formal agreement. So if the bargaining actually gives the satisfactions for both the sides, then they try to comply with the sort of bargaining process and they try to sign these formal documentations for the organizations. So these are the steps, or these are the stages that need to be maintained by the both the parties within the organizations for having a actual bargaining. So there are some suggestions in case of doing bargaining. I think you are very aware about these issues, that whenever we are going to bargain in favor of our interest, then we need to be very specified about our objectives. We need to be very specified about our goals. And apart from that, we need not to make hurry. We need to give proper time, adequate time to bring a solutions and understanding the problems very well. So in step number 3, or the point number 3, we are experiencing when in doubt, discuss with your associates. So if you have any doubt from your side, then you should take counseling from the associates or the supervisor that you trust most. So these are the issues that we need to keep in our mind while we are going to create a bargaining with our top level managements, or the top level managements when they are going to bargain with the general employees. They need to be very sincere. They need to be very conscious about these other issues. These are very common, so I'm not going to explain these other issues much more right at this moment. And apart from that, there are some other points like be a good listener. So you need to understand, you need to listen others very well so that you can create the solutions and understand the problems very well. You need to build a reputation for being fair but the firms. So if you have the good image of ensuring the fair judgments, then the employee will trust over you. And whenever they will trust you, it will be very easier for you to bring a consensus in the bargaining process. So these are the issues that should be kept in our mind. Yes, whenever we fail to follow the suggestions that we have presented in the last 2 slides, that sometimes create an impasse. Now the question is, what is impasse? Impasse means a bottleneck, or impasse means a particular blockade that creates the problems in bringing the solutions of the bargaining process. So usually occurs because one party is demanding more than the other will offer. So if we demand more than the other parties can offer, then it will be very illegitimate and it will create the bargaining process very futile. So we need to be very careful about it, that we need to demand those particular issues that can be satisfied by the organizations. Okay, and that should be aligned with the terms and conditions in our appointment letter. So these are the issues that we need to keep in our mind. Okay, and the final thing, that is the solutions of an impasse or the solutions of the blockage. How can we overcome from that sort of impasse? The sort of techniques that we can use, as you know, the mediations, fact finding, and arbitrations. So mediations, in that particular terms, what we actually try to understand, we try to imply, or we try to bring a particular third party who will try to assist the principals in reaching an agreement by holding the meetings. That means we can appoint a particular third party who will try to bring solutions about this particular dispute or the conflicting issues. They can bring a solutions on based on that. They can work as a mediator, and they try to communicate with both the parties and try to bring the solutions for both the parties. So that is the basic sense of mediations. So there can be another particular solution, that is the fact finding or the fact finder. So a neutral party, it is also a neutral party who studies the issues in a dispute and makes a public recommendation for a reasonable settlement. So they try to find out the particular problem for which the conflict has been happened, and they try to make a public recommendations that will be followed by both the parties. And the last thing that we are experiencing, that is the arbitrations. So an arbitrator often has the power to determine and dictate the settlement terms. So it can be formed by the top level managements from their sides to bring a negotiations between both the parties. So they can come and they can try to bring a solutions of that particular problems for which the conflict has been happened within the organization, and based on that they try to create some sort of solutions for solving this particular problem for which the union strikes. So these are the reasons. The reasons come from the economic sides. The strikes come from the very unfair labor practices, wildcat strikes. That means the employees sometimes fail to understand themselves very properly, and they try to make some quarrel with themselves. So that is the kind of reasons for which the union can strike sometimes. Whenever the top level management fails to understand these problems. And final thing, that is the sympathy strike. So sometimes the organization and employees wants that the normal productivity will run, but we need to ensure our proper justice from the top level management. So they try to ensure their sympathy strike for that particular reason. So these are the sort of strikes that the organizational employees can come out and try to bring the solutions for these other issues. So the pressure tactics alternatives. So if the negotiations, mediations, arbitrations, or fact findings issues does not occur within the organizations, then the employees can come out with the picketing, corporate campaign, boycott, inside games, injunctions. So these not other issues that are expected from the organizational point of view and from the productivity point of view. So these are the issues that should be avoided by, and for avoiding these other issues, the top level management and the general employees and their unions, all the parties should be very careful and very sincere to solve their own problems within the organizations. Okay. And the final thing that we are going to discuss in our today's session, that is the grievances. So whenever all these suggestions are very missed within the organizations, at that particular times, organizational employees feel very grievances. They try to come out from the organizational arena, and they try to violate their own common periphery of the working manner. And there are some sources of forming these sort of grievances. It's like the discipline, it's like the seniority, job evaluations, working assignments, overtime, vacations. So the general employees can find their grievances on the unfair judgments of all these other sources. So whenever the employees experiences unjustified manner, whenever the general employees experiences some very casual activities of the top level managements in that particular areas, which are very basic and fundamental issues of the organization, they can come out with their grievances, and which is not very good for the organizations, because whenever the employees suffers from these sort of grievances, they cannot actually ensure their productivity. So organizations, and especially the human resource department, needs to understand, address these particular issues, and try to bring a solutions for that one. So probably these are the issues for which we have tried to discuss about the grievances, and that was about our learning outcomes in that particular chapters what we have covered. So actually that was about the last chapter what we have discussed in today's sessions. So we have completed 10 different chapters, and this was about the last one, where we are experiencing some sort of conflict, some sort of grievances, and the actual mechanisms for depending on which we can solve this sort of grievances and the conflicts within the organization. So these all are the activities that needs to be performed by the human resource department. They try to open up their duties from the very beginning of job analysis. Then they try to go to their next stage of recruitment and selection. So after selecting the potential candidates, then they need to train up themselves well. They can ensure the on-the-job training and off-the-job training for having a particular exposure of the working units, and then they can ensure the actual performance appraisal of these general employees, based on which they will ensure the compensation, and after that they need to ensure the service and benefits. And in the last chapters what we have discussed, that is another activity of human resource management, very basic activities, that is ethics, justice, and fair judgment. And finally we have discussed about the collective bargaining and the negotiations. If any dispute happens, then how can we address these other issues, and how can we bring solutions for that particular issues. So that was about the journey of human resource management. So that is formally the last sessions of our journey, but I will take a particular live sessions with all of you, and it will be happened just before the final exam, and it can be arranged in a one or two particular consecutive sessions. It would be better if I can take these particular sessions directly with you. But if the situation does not permit us, then we should take it in online. But it will be happened on live sessions. You can come out from your, you can come out with your particular questions that you have grown in your minds regarding human resource management, and I will be trying to satisfy your concerns regarding these other issues. So that was about our particular issues. Now I would like to welcome all of you in the next sessions that uh, I will create on the next sessions of the particular journey. So till then, Allah Hafiz to all, and keep yourself and your family safe.